My grandson! Where is my grandson? Elder Anya's cry tore through the frozen air at 71 Nadduxi, sharper than any blade. With her muscles in tatters and her breath freezing, she had just slain the last of 7 giant bears that had invaded her den, her fists bloody and her soul ablaze. Desperate, she scoured the blood-stained snow and the massive bodies, but there was no sign of him. Terror chilled her veins, convincing her that the worst had happened. It was then that, from the depths of the newly liberated den's darkness, a faint sound, a child's whimper, broke the deadly silence. It was his cry, her grandson's cry, and what she would do now would change everything forever. The faint yet undeniable cry echoed off the icy walls of the den, a sound that tore through the veil of Anya's despair and ignited a flame of hope so intense that her legs, already trembling from the brutal battle, finally gave way. She collapsed onto the blood-soaked snow, not from defeat, but from an overwhelming relief that drained her of all remaining strength. Tears, long frozen in her heart, now streamed warm down her face, marked by cold and pain. Mixing with sweat and dried blood, it was him. Her grandson was alive. With a last shred of energy, the elder dragged herself forward, ignoring the searing pain in her muscles and the deep wounds bleeding beneath her torn clothes. Every movement was agony, but the melody of that fragile cry was her only guide, her sole reason to continue. The darkness of the den seemed to swallow her, but she pressed on, fumbling along the uneven ground, feeling the ice and snow beneath her calloused hands. The strong scent of the dead bears still hung in the air, a grim reminder of the fight she had just waged, but now all that mattered was finding her little one. Finally, in a more distant corner, almost hidden by a rocky outcrop, she saw him. Huddled, trembling uncontrollably, with wide eyes of fear and a pale face, there was her grandson. His blue lips babbled something inaudible, and his small hands were pressed against his chest, as if trying to contain his own heart. Anya felt a pang of guilt for not having found him sooner, for having left him alone with the terror, but the relief of seeing him breathe, of seeing him there, so fragile and precious, overcame everything. She extended her hand slowly, afraid of scaring him further. "My little one." "Anya is here," she whispered in a hoarse, almost inaudible voice. The boy, hearing the familiar voice, lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers. For an instant, fear gave way to a spark of recognition, and then, with a muffled sob, he threw himself into her arms. Anya embraced him with all the strength she had left, feeling his tiny body tremble against hers, the warmth of his skin a miracle amidst the biting cold. She held him close, cradling him, protecting him from the cruel world outside. He was miraculously unharmed, only the cold and terror had marked his small body. Anya closed her eyes, breathing deeply the scent of her grandson, the smell of home, of life. The physical pain seemed to diminish before the immensity of her gratitude. But reality soon set in. They were in the bear's lair, tens of kilometers from the village, with the blizzard still raging outside and Anya's exhausted body barely sustaining itself. How would she take him back? How would she find the strength to face the journey home, carrying her precious burden? Looking at her grandson's sleeping face, who had finally found some peace in her arms, Anya felt a new wave of determination. The same strength that had driven her to face the beasts now compelled her to protect him from the relentless wilderness. She no longer had her knife, lost somewhere in the battle, nor the energy to hunt. But she had her love, her ancestral wisdom, and the certainty that she had defied death. The elder knew that the way back would be even more arduous than the fight against the bears, but she would not hesitate. Her grandson was her world, and for him she would move mountains of ice, if necessary. With a sigh, she began to plan, her mind already seeking solutions, while the cold of the den tried in vain to freeze the flame of her hope. With her grandson's tiny body nestled in her arms, a fragile and precious warmth against the biting cold of the den, Anya felt her mind, previously clouded by exhaustion, clear with renewed urgency. The flame of hope, ignited by the boy's cry, now burned with the intensity of a beacon in the darkness. They were alive, yes, but the journey back to the village was a mountain to be climbed, and Anya knew that every step would demand a strength she barely felt she possessed. Her gaze swept across the den, searching for any resource, any fragment of material hope. The strong scent of the bears, once threatening, was now just a reminder of the battle won. She needed warmth, protection for her grandson, and a means to transport him. The knife, her faithful companion, was lost, but the wisdom of her ancestors, etched into her soul, was a tool sharper than any blade. With a groan of pain, Anya tried to move, but exhaustion held her captive. Her grandson, stirring with the movement, lifted his head and looked at her with tear-filled eyes. A childish fear still present, but now mixed with the trust of being in his grandmother's arms. Anya smiled weakly, a gesture that cost immense effort. "Don't worry, my little one. Anya will take us home," she whispered, stroking the boy's icy hair. That touch, that promise, was all he needed to nestle back in, seeking the comfort only she could offer. The elder noticed the thick bear hides scattered haphazardly around the den. Though they were a reminder of the recent violence, they now represented the only chance of survival. With great difficulty, using her calloused hands and teeth, she began to pull and tear pieces from the nearest hides, ignoring the nausea and pain from her wounds. It was not an easy task, and every movement seemed to drain the last drop of her energy. But the image of her grandson, trembling from the cold, spurred her on. She needed to create a covering, a cocoon of warmth for him. Slowly, with the patience of one who knows the rhythms of nature, Anya gathered the pieces of hide, overlapping them and tying them with leather strips she managed to tear from her own clothes and some remnants found in the den. Her fingers, numb from the cold and swollen from the blows, worked with an almost instinctive precision. She imagined a small sled, something that could glide over the snow, but the lack of wood and sturdy ropes made the idea impossible. The only way would be to carry him. But how? Anya looked at her grandson, who was sleeping deeply, exhausted. The love she felt for him was a palpable force, warmer than any fire and more resilient than the eternal ice of IACUTA. She picked him up carefully and wrapped him in the improvised cocoon of hides, pressing him against her chest. He was light, but the distance to the village was immense, and the cold, relentless. She needed a strategy for every step, for every breath. With her grandson safe and warm, Anya allowed herself a brief moment of rest. Her eyes closed, but her mind continued to work, visualizing the way back. She knew the village would be in despair, fearing the worst, the responsibility of bringing her grandson back and of calming anxious hearts weighed on her shoulders. But this burden did not crush her. On the contrary, it strengthened her. She would forge a path through the blizzard, defy the howling wind and the biting cold. For her grandson, for her family, she would find the strength to move the world. The journey would be long and perilous, but Anya, with her heart ablaze, was ready to face the next challenge. Anya opened her eyes, the brief rest having done nothing to diminish the searing pain that coursed through every fiber of her body. Her muscles screamed in protest, and her head throbbed with deep exhaustion. But as she felt the light weight of her grandson nestled against her chest, protected by the improvised cocoon of hides, a wave of warmth spread through her, more potent than any balm. He breathed calmly, his face serene in sleep, and this sight was the only fuel she needed. The village, the blizzard, the distance. Everything seemed a lesser challenge compared to the preciousness of the life she held. With a muffled groan, Anya tried to stand. Her legs, still shaky, barely supported her. She leaned against the icy wall of the den, feeling the cold penetrate her torn clothes, but the urgency to act was greater than the discomfort. She needed a plan, a means to carry him. The idea of a sled was impossible without wood or ropes. All that remained was the strength of her own arms, but for how long? The journey would be long, and with every step the cold would try to steal her energy. Her gaze wandered over the hides of the dead bears, which lay scattered. They were thick, heavy, but offered protection. She needed something that could fasten her grandson's cocoon to her back, freeing her hands to brace herself, to dig in the snow, to fight against the wind. With her knife lost, her calloused hands and teeth were her only tools. Slowly, with patience forged in endless winters, Anya began to tear thinner strips from one of the bear hides, the most flexible ones she found. It was arduous work, and the strong scent of the dead animal, mixed with dried blood, almost made her recoil, but the image of her grandson spurred her on. Each strip was a thread of hope. She braided them with numb and swollen fingers, creating a kind of sturdy strap. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was strong enough. Carefully, she adjusted the hide cocoon with her grandson inside, positioning him on her back. The braided strips were tied over her shoulders and around her waist, distributing the weight as best as possible. The boy grumbled a little, but didn't wake, still immersed in the deep sleep of exhaustion and relief. Anya felt the warmth of his body against her back, a constant presence that reminded her of her mission. She moved, testing the new arrangement. The pain was immense, but her grandson's weight, though considerable, felt lighter, sustained by love. Her shoulders ached, but the freedom of her hands was crucial. Now she could balance better, could use her arms to push away snow or to protect herself from the wind. The elder knew the journey would be relentless, that every meter would be a battle against nature and against her own exhausted body. But she was not alone. Her grandson was with her, and for him, she would find the strength to go beyond her limits. Anya looked at the entrance of the den from where the wind howled, bringing with it the reminder of the furious blizzard. The world outside was a white and icy desert, but she could no longer delay. Time was an enemy as cruel as the cold. The village would be worried, their hearts heavy with her and the boy's absence. She needed to return, not just for her grandson, but to calm the hearts of her community. With a final breath, filling her lungs with the icy air, Anya took the first step towards the exit. Her mind focused on the promise of home, her heart burning with unwavering determination. Anya took the first step out of the den, and the world swallowed her in a white and icy maelstrom that seemed endless. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, whipping snowflakes that felt like sharp needles against her exposed skin, already marked by wounds and cold. The 70 considered temperature bit at every inch of her body, and the air she breathed burned her lungs with each inhale, as if she was swallowing icy embers. The weight of her grandson on her back, though a burden of unconditional love, now felt like a heavy anchor, pulling her down into the rapidly accumulating deep snow, making every movement difficult. Every attempt to move forward was excruciating torture. The wounds from the brutal battle against the bears, previously dulled by adrenaline and the relief of finding the boy, now pulsed with a searing, constant pain. Dried blood pulled at her skin, and her muscles, already exhausted from days of deprivation and struggle, trembled uncontrollably with each attempt to lift her heavy, numb legs. Anya squeezed her eyes shut, trying in vain to see through the dense curtain of snow, but visibility was almost nil. The world was just white and grey, an endless labyrinth where every direction seemed identical to the next. Anya. Cold. Her grandson's weak, trembling voice, mixed with a muffled cry, broke the deafening silence of the blizzard. He had woken, and the sound of his suffering tightened the elder's heart. She stopped, turning her head as much as she could to feel the boy's fragile warmth on her back, a living reminder of her mission. "It's all right, my little one. We're going home, to the warmth of our hearth," she murmured, her voice hoarse and almost inaudible against the wind's fury. She caressed the improvised hide cocoon, feeling his body tremble, and a pang of guilt struck her. She had exposed him to so much danger, but there was no time for regrets or to give in to guilt. There was only the present, the urgent need to survive. Anya remembered her grandmother's lessons, the ancestral wisdom passed down through generations of hunters and ice survivors. The wind always points the way, even when there is no visible path, her grandmother had said. Anya closed her eyes for an instant, concentrating on the icy, relentless breath, trying to discern its direction, its persistence. The wind clearly came from the north, pushing her south towards the approximate direction of the village, a small, invisible but reliable compass guiding her amidst the chaos. She began to walk again, one step at a time, sinking into the soft, unstable snow. Her feet, once agile and accustomed to long treks, now dragged with difficulty. Every 10 steps she had to stop, gasping for breath, her lungs burning, her heart beating erratically and painfully. But the warmth of her grandson on her back, the slight movement of his tiny body, was a constant reminder of her promise and the life she carried. She could not fail, not after having faced and defeated the bears. The blizzard seemed to intensify with each passing minute, and Anya felt despair gnaw at the edges of her determination, like a hungry rat. What if she couldn't make it? What if the village was too far for her depleted strength? The image of her neighbors, their worried faces, their eyes full of sadness and apprehension, flashed through her mind. They would be praying for her grandson, waiting for a sign of life. She was the guardian, the protector of her blood and her community. She could not surrender now. With a Herculean effort, which seemed to tear the last vestige of energy from her soul, she spotted a rock formation, almost completely covered by snow, but offering a minimum of shelter against the wind's fury. It was a small victory, a point of reference in the white chaos that surrounded her. She dragged herself there, slipping and falling a few times in the snow, but always getting up with the stubbornness of a mountain. Upon reaching the rock, she leaned against it, allowing herself a precious moment to breathe, to shield her grandson from the stronger wind that howled past. The boy, feeling the sudden stop, lifted his head again from the cocoon. "Anya, hungry," he whispered, his voice even weaker, almost a breath. The elder's heart painfully tightened. She had no food, no water, and the village was far, very far. Night was approaching, promising an even crueler cold and a darkness that would make navigation almost impossible. Fear, an unwanted and persistent companion, squeezed her chest. But then she felt her grandson's faint sigh on her back, and the flame of her hope rekindled, stronger than ever. She would not stop, she could not. Her grandson's faint whisper, "Anya, hungry," echoed in the elder's heart, sharper than the icy wind. Night was approaching, bringing darkness and an even crueler cold. To continue the journey now would be a reckless risk, an invitation to defeat. The rock formation, previously a mere foothold in the vast white desert, transformed into her only hope for temporary shelter. With a sigh that seemed to tear the last air from her lungs, Anya turned, shielding her grandson from the biting wind with her own bent body, a fragile but determined shield. "Don't worry, my little one. We'll rest here for a bit," she murmured, her voice hoarse and raspy from the cold as she struggled to crouch by the rock. Every movement was excruciating torture, her muscles aching and wounds throbbing beneath her torn clothes, which no longer offered much protection. Her grandson, nestled on her back, felt his grandmother's gentle sway and faint warmth, and though hunger tormented him with sharp pangs, her presence was a balm to his small, frightened heart. With the patience of one who had learned to read nature's most subtle signs, Anya began to work. Her calloused hands, despite being numb and swollen, fumbled through the snow around the rock, seeking the most sheltered spot from the howling wind. She needed a barrier, something that could retain the little heat their bodies generated amidst that overwhelming cold. Her eyes swept across the desolate landscape and then landed on the hides of the dead bears, which she had left behind in the den. A pang of despair struck her. How could she bring those heavy, bulky hides all the way here, with her strength so depleted? But the vivid image of her grandson, trembling from the cold, his stomach empty and face pale, pushed away any thought of giving up. She had faced the 7 giant bears. Now she would face the distance, the weight, and the blizzard's fury. With a superhuman effort, which seemed to tear life itself from her body, Anya rose again, the pain in her legs almost felling her with each step. "Stay here, my little one. Anya will be right back," she said, her voice laden with a determination that defied her exhausted body and clouded mind. With slow, painful steps, she began to retrace her path back to the den, her vision blurred by fatigue and the incessant wind. With every meter, the snow seemed deeper, the air denser and heavier, and the cold more penetrating. The path back to the den, which had once seemed so short and insignificant, now stretched like an eternity of suffering. Her wounds bled anew, and the cold penetrated her bones, making them ache to the marrow. But she did not stop. The memory of her grandson's hungry cry was a whip to her soul, propelling her forward, not allowing despair to overcome her. Finally, the darkness of the den appeared before her, a grim refuge, yet full of resources for survival. Inside, she dragged herself to the thickest, heaviest bear hides. With an effort that seemed to tear her very soul, she managed to drag 2 of them out, using the leather strips she had made for her grandson's cocoon. The weight was crushing, almost unbearable, but the need was even greater, more urgent. Dragging the hides through the snow, leaving a dark trail, she made her way back to the rock, where her grandson awaited her, huddled and trembling, hope flickering in his eyes. Upon seeing her return, the boy let out a small whimper of relief, a sound that warmed Anya's frozen heart. Exhausted, the elder collapsed beside him, the hides falling heavily onto the soft snow. "Here, my love, to keep us warm," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible, but full of love. With the help of the rocks, she propped up the hides, creating a small covering, an improvised cocoon that offered a minimum of protection against the wind and snow that insisted on punishing them. They huddled together under the hide, the fragile warmth of their bodies mingling, a small island of life amidst the icy, relentless desert. Hunger still tormented them, a constant ache in their stomachs, but the cold, for now, was a little more bearable. Anya hugged her grandson tightly, feeling his tiny body calm in her arms, finding a safe refuge. She began to hum an ancient Yakutian lullaby, a soft melody that spoke of twinkling stars and forest spirits, of brave hunters and winters that always ended, giving way to spring. Her voice, though hoarse and weak, was a thread of hope in the darkness, a reminder that, even in the most adverse conditions, love and resilience could ignite an inextinguishable flame. The boy, lulled by the song and his grandmother's comforting warmth, closed his eyes, hunger still present but fear diminishing, replaced by a faint sense of security. Anya knew the night would be long, but they were together, and that, in itself, was a victory that defied winter itself. The hoarse and fragile lullaby cradled her grandson, who had finally succumbed to deep sleep, his tiny body a warmth against his grandmother's chest. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom, scanned the shelter, her mind searching for solutions to the boy's hunger, a pain that pierced her deeper. The night promised to be relentless, diminishing their chances of survival with each passing minute. Exhaustion weighed like mountains of ice as she closed her eyes. Images of the village, of worried faces, of hearth smoke and warm food flooded her mind. A solitary tear escaped, freezing. It was not despair, but deep longing, a yearning for home. She needed to be strong, for her grandson and for the community that awaited. Suddenly, amidst the howling wind, an almost imperceptible sound, a subtle vibration reached her ears. She lifted her head, senses sharpened by the wild. It was faint, muffled by the blizzard, distinct. It was neither animal nor ice. It was rhythmic, a distant thump-thump, coming from beyond the white curtain. She held her breath, trying to discern the sound's origin. The boy grumbled, sensing the change. Anya held him tighter, her mind feverish. Was it the wind or her heart? She concentrated, filtering out the storm's chaos, and the sound came again, clearer. Thump, 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 thump. And they were hooves, something heavy moving over the compacted snow, with a metallic creak and a faint rustle. Her heart leaped. She knew that sound. It was a sled, pulled by dogs or reindeer. Someone was out there, in the white fury, searching for them. Hope, previously fragile, erupted into a blaze, warming her from within. The village hadn't given up. They were coming. With immense effort, Anya tried to move, but the weight of her grandson and the hides immobilized her. She needed to signal her presence. Her hoarse, weak voice would barely reach the sled. Her eyes swept the shelter. Nothing. Knife lost. Darkness. The sled was louder and closer. What if they passed right by, the blizzard preventing them from being seen? She had to act. With trembling hands, she began to beat on the rock, a desperate rhythm, a call for help. Thump, 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 and thump, thump, thump. The sound was faint, but she hoped it would be heard in the quiet of the night. Her grandson, startled, opened his eyes. "Anya," he whispered. "Shh, my little one. They're coming," she replied, her voice choked with emotion and new strength. She continued to beat, her heart in unison with the sound of the sled. The turning point had arrived, a promise of a miracle amidst the icy hell of IACUTA. The sled was so close she could almost feel the vibration in the ground. The sled was so close she could almost feel the vibration in the ground. Anya redoubled her efforts, beating on the rock with her numb hands. A desperate rhythm she hoped would be more audible than the howling wind. Each beat was a silent scream, a prayer for salvation. Her grandson, nestled on her back, grumbled again, the fright from his grandmother's change in rhythm mixing with hunger and cold. "Anya, what is that?" he whispered, his voice so faint it could barely be heard. "Shh, my little one. They're coming. The village is coming for us," she replied, her voice choked with emotion and effort. A new wave of adrenaline coursed through her exhausted body, giving her momentary strength. She needed to be seen, needed to be heard. Her eyes swept the darkness and snow, trying to glimpse any light, any shape through the white curtain. Suddenly, the dark silhouettes of sled dogs emerged through the blizzard, their muzzles sniffing the icy air, their barks muffled by the wind, but unmistakable. Behind them, a tall, robust figure, wrapped in thick furs, pulled the sled, followed by two more men. They were village hunters, their faces marked by worry and determination. Anya's heart leaped with such intense relief that it almost made her collapse. "Anya, is that you?" Boris's deep voice, the leader of the search party, cut through the air. He was a man of few words but a big heart, and his eyes, now fixed on Anya, were filled with a mixture of relief and astonishment. The dogs, sensing human presence, stopped abruptly, barking with more vigor. Anya couldn't respond immediately, words caught in her throat, choked by emotion. She merely nodded, warm tears streaming down her frozen cheeks. Boris and the other two men rushed to her, sinking into the snow. Their faces, illuminated by the lantern one of them carried, revealed the exhaustion of the search, but also the joy of having found them. "By the Great Spirit, you're alive!" exclaimed Mikhail, one of the younger hunters, his eyes moist. He knelt beside Anya, examining her with concern. "Anya, your wounds." And the boy. The elder, with immense effort, untied the straps that held her grandson to her back. The boy, startled by the stranger's presence and the bright light, huddled even deeper into the hide cocoon. Boris picked him up carefully, his large, dark eyes examining the boy's pale face. "He's very cold and hungry," Boris said, his voice soft but firm. The hunters acted quickly. One of them, Ivan, took a warm reindeer wool blanket from the sled and wrapped the boy, who began to tremble uncontrollably, but now from relief and not just cold. Another man offered Anya a piece of dried meat and a sip of hot tea from a canteen. The warmth of the tea burned her throat, but the energy it brought was immediate, a balm for her exhausted body. The den. 7 bears. Anya managed to murmur, her voice hoarse. "He was there. I faced them." The men exchanged glances, incredulity and admiration on their faces. 7 giant bears, an elder alone with a hunting knife? It was a story that defied reason, but Anya's wounds, the bear hides that protected her, and her grandson alive in her arms were irrefutable proof. "Let's go home, Anya. You and the boy need care," Boris said, his voice full of respect. They helped her to her feet, their strong bodies supporting hers, which barely stood. Her grandson, now warmer, was in Ivan's arms, who gently cradled him. The journey back to the village would be long, but hope had returned. The sled, once a distant sound, was now the promise of warmth, food, and safety. Anya, sitting in the sled, feeling the warmth of the blanket and the gentle movement, closed her eyes. The love of her community, the strength of her family, all united to bring them back. She had defied death, nature, and her own limits, and now the village welcomed them back, a testament to the unbreakable human connection that flourished even in the world's most frigid heart. She felt Boris's hand squeeze hers, a silent gesture of admiration and gratitude. The journey was not yet over, but the darkest part was behind them. Boris's hand in hers, a silent gesture of admiration and gratitude, was a balm to Anya's exhausted soul. The sled glided through the snow. The soft creak of the runners and the rhythmic thud of the reindeer hooves were the only sounds breaking the distant howl of the wind. Sitting amidst the warm blankets, with her grandson nestled in her arms, Anya felt her body vibrate with exhaustion, but also with a deep peace she hadn't known for a long time. The fear that had accompanied her like a frigid shadow for days finally began to dissipate. Her grandson, whom Ivan now cradled carefully, was calmer. The hot tea and dried meat had given him some strength, and he slept a restless but safe sleep, wrapped in reindeer wool. Anya watched the hunters' faces, illuminated by the faint light of the lantern. Boris, with his serious expression and eyes that revealed deep kindness. Mikhail, the youngest, his face still marked by apprehension but now relieved, and Ivan, the eldest, whose calloused hands held the boy with surprising tenderness. They were the personification of their village's resilience, men who defied the fury of IACUTA in the name of community. "Anya, you are a force of nature," Boris murmured, his voice hoarse, breaking the silence. His eyes met hers, and a deep, mutual respect settled between them. To face 7 bears, alone, for him. He shook his head slowly, as if still trying to process the magnitude of the feat. Anya merely smiled weakly, her throat still sore. There were no words to describe what she had endured, nor the strength that her love for her grandson had awakened in her. It was a force beyond comprehension, a silent and unbreakable fury. With each turn of the sled, the elder felt her muscles protest, her wounds throbbing beneath the improvised bandages. But the pain was now a reminder that she was alive, that she had won. The image of the bears, their sharp claws and hungry eyes, still haunted her mind, but the sight of her grandson safe in her arms was a shield against any lingering terror. She had fought not only for his life, but for her own, for the continuity of her lineage, for the hope of her village. The sled continued its slow and steady path. The blizzard, though still present, seemed to have lessened its intensity, as if nature too was exhausted from the battle. The icy air still bit, but the warmth of the blankets and the proximity of the men offered a comfort that had previously seemed unattainable. Anya closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the gentle sway of the sled, the sound of hooves on the snow, the scent of furs and smoke coming from the hunters. It was the smell of home, of safety, of life. Suddenly, a flickering light appeared in the darkness ahead, then another and another. They were the village lights, small stars twinkling in the white vastness. A collective sigh of relief escaped the hunters. The sight of those lights, so fragile and distant, yet so full of promise, made Anya's heart ache. There were the warm hearths, the food, the familiar faces, the community that awaited her. As they approached, the figures of people began to distinguish themselves. The entire village seemed to have come out to receive them, their anxious and worried faces now transforming into expressions of relief and joy. Women, children, elders, all there, braving the cold to welcome their own. It was a sight that filled Anya's eyes with renewed tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. The sled stopped in the central square, and a respectful silence fell over the crowd. All eyes were fixed on Anya and the boy. Boris was the first to stand, extending a hand to help the elder. "We're home, Anya," he said, his voice choked. She nodded, feeling her legs shaky as she tried to rise. Her grandson, awakened by the commotion, looked at the crowd with wide eyes, but then nestled closer to his grandmother, seeking her familiar comfort. People began to approach, their faces expressing a mixture of shock and admiration. An older woman, with hair white as snow, ran to Anya, embracing her tightly. It was Elena, her neighbor and longtime friend. "Anya, by the Great Spirit, you're alive, and the boy!" Elena wept, tears freezing on her cheeks. Other hands reached out, offering help, touches of affection and words of welcome. The human connection, as vital as the air they breathed, enveloped Anya and her grandson, healing the invisible wounds of the soul. The warmth of the community was more potent than any hearth, more comforting than any blanket, a reminder that even in the harshest winter, love and solidarity could flourish and warm the most frigid hearts. The villagers quickly formed a path, their expressions a mixture of shock and palpable relief, guiding Anya and the boy to the central yurt, the large communal tent where the warmest fires burned ceaselessly. Elena, her eyes still moist, offered Anya a strong arm, helping her with each faltering step. "Come, my dear. The healer is waiting, and there's hot soup, freshly made for you." Her grandson, still safe in Ivan's arms, watched everything with a mixture of childish curiosity and residual fear, his large, dark eyes reflecting the flickering torchlights that illuminated the way. Inside the yurt, the atmosphere was one of silent reverence and extreme care. The air, thick with the comforting scent of birchwood smoke and dried medicinal herbs, was a balm to the lungs after the biting cold outside. The old healer, Ksenia, a woman with a face deeply wrinkled by age and sun, but with incredibly gentle hands, was already preparing a hot herbal infusion for Anya. She examined the elder's wounds with an experienced and concerned gaze, her white eyebrows furrowed. "By the spirit of the ancestors, Anya, you have been blessed with a strength beyond human comprehension," Ksenia murmured, as she cleaned and bandaged the deep wounds that marked Anya's arms and legs. The pain, previously dulled by adrenaline and extreme cold, now pulsed with a searing intensity, but Anya did not utter a single sound of complaint. She merely squeezed Elena's hand, a silent gesture that spoke volumes of gratitude. Her grandson was carefully brought near the central fire, where a group of village women awaited him with soft sheepskin blankets and a steaming bowl of reindeer meat soup, the steam dancing in the cold yurt air. He hesitated for a moment, his small eyes fixed on the food, but hunger overcame fear. His small fingers, still a little numb, grasped the bowl and he began to eat, slowly at first, then with more eagerness, the warmth of the soup bringing a rosy color back to his pale cheeks. Anya watched the scene, a knot of tension slowly unraveling in her chest. Seeing her grandson safe, warm, and finally fed was the greatest reward, irrefutable proof that all her suffering and the epic battle had not been in vain. Boris and the other hunters, after ensuring Anya and the boy were well cared for, reported the events to the gathered community. The words, 7 giant bears and alone, echoed through the yurt, filling the air with a mixture of shock, admiration, and deep, reverent respect. No one in the village, not even the oldest elders, had ever heard of such a feat of courage and strength. Anya, the elder whom many saw as fragile and delicate, had transformed into a living legend, a fierce guardian whose courage and love defied nature's very fury. Her name would be whispered with reverence around the campfires for many generations. As Senior applied a soothing herbal balm to Anya's wounds, the elder felt the weight of exhaustion finally overcome her completely. Her eyes closed, but not for immediate sleep. In her mind, images of the dark den, of bears roaring with ferocity, of the biting cold that seemed to tear at the soul, and of her grandson's faint, desperate cry mingled in a whirlwind of vivid memories. It was a trauma that would take time to heal, a scar that would not only be physical, but would be deeply etched into her soul. But amidst this persistent darkness, a light shone with intensity, the image of her grandson's face, alive and safe, and the comforting warmth of her community's hands enveloped her. Anya opened her eyes again, meeting Ksenia's gentle and understanding gaze. "He is well, Anya. You saved him, my sister. You brought him back to us," the healer said, her voice soft as snow falling on a calm day. Anya nodded slowly, a solitary tear tracing her scarred cheek and lightly freezing. It was not from pain, but from overwhelming relief and immense gratitude. She had faced the icy hell of IACUTA, not for personal glory or recognition, but for love. And that love, now, was the warmth that enveloped her completely, the unbreakable bond that united her family and her village. Night advanced, and the wind outside continued to howl its wild song, but inside the yurt, the flame of life and hope burned stronger than ever, a silent testament to human resilience. The village had gathered, not just to welcome them back, but to celebrate the life, courage, and capacity for overcoming that Anya personified with every fiber of her being. Winter was cruel and relentless, but the human spirit, driven by the purest love, was even more powerful and unbreakable. The following morning brought with it a different silence, not the oppressive silence of the blizzard, but a reverent silence within the central yurt. Anya lay on a soft bed of furs, her wounds cleaned and carefully bandaged by Ksenia's experienced hands. Every movement was a pang of pain, a vivid reminder of the battle she had waged, but the physical pain was now accompanied by a sense of security and peace. Her grandson, nestled beside her, slept deeply, his face pale and marked by hunger and fear, but now relaxed, his breathing soft and regular. Elena and other village women took turns caring for them, bringing nutritious broths and herbal teas that warmed body and soul. The men, including Boris, Mikhail, and Ivan, visited frequently, their gazes filled with a respect Anya had never imagined. They spoke in whispers, as if fearing to disturb the sanctity of that healing space. Stories of Anya's feat already circulated through the village, mingling with the howling wind and the crackling of the fires. It was a legend being born, not of reckless bravery, but of a love that defied death itself. Anya, however, did not see herself as a heroine. She saw herself merely as a grandmother who would do anything for her blood. In the days that followed, recovery was slow but steady. Her grandson, with the vitality of youth, recovered more quickly. His eyes, previously full of apprehension, began to shine again with childish curiosity. He smiled, a small smile at first, then wider as he ate the steaming soup or played with a small wooden doll that Ivan had carved for him. Anya, watching him, felt her heart fill with unspeakable joy. The scars on her body would be permanent, but the scar on her soul, that of the fear of losing him, began to close. The nights, however, were still a challenge. Nightmares assailed her, bringing back the roar of the bears, the smell of blood, the biting cold. She would wake up gasping, her heart pounding, but then she would feel the warmth of her grandson beside her, and the reality of the present would calm her. He was there, he was alive, and that was all that mattered. The community, in turn, continued to surround them with affection. The women brought new furs for their bed. The men ensured the yurt was always warm and that there was plenty of food. No one left them alone for long, a silent testament to the connection that bound them. The village, which had faced hunger and nature's fury, now celebrated life, resilience, and the strength of an elder whose love had overcome the harshest winter. Anya, sitting near the fire, with her grandson asleep on her lap, felt the warmth of the flames on her face. That warmth was not just from the fire, but from the love that surrounded her, from the unbreakable spirit of her people. She knew that life in Yakutia would always be a battle, but now, more than ever, she knew she was not alone. The future, though uncertain, was a little brighter, warmed by the flame of hope and gratitude that now burned in her soul. Enya felt this flame, fragile but persistent, warming the coldest corner of her being. Days turned into weeks, and the central yurt became a refuge of healing and whispered stories. Her body, though still marked by deep scars, responded to Senior's balms and the constant warmth of the fire. But it was the nights that tested her resilience. The roar of the bears still echoed in her dreams, their sharp claws and hungry eyes resurfacing in the darkness, making her wake up gasping, her heart pounding. Elena, who often slept near her, was always there to offer a gentle hand, warm tea, and words of comfort. "It's all right, my sister. They are gone. You won," she whispered, and Anya clung to that truth like a talisman. Her grandson, on the other hand, was a ray of sunshine amidst the darkness of her memories. With the vitality of youth, he recovered quickly. His eyes, previously full of apprehension, now shone with childish curiosity, exploring every corner of the yurt, every friendly face. He smiled, a small smile at first, then wider and more contagious, as he ate the steaming soup or played with the small wooden doll that Ivan had carved for him. Seeing him laugh, seeing him run, was the most potent balm for Anya's soul, living proof that her struggle had not been in vain. The scars on her body would be permanent, but the scar on her soul, that of the fear of losing him, began to close, slowly, like snow covering the marks of an ancient trail. The village, in turn, no longer saw her merely as Elder Anya. There was a new gleam in their eyes when they looked at her, a mixture of reverence and admiration. Children followed her with curious gazes, and the men, even the most robust, bowed their heads in a sign of respect. Boris, in particular, visited her daily, not just to check on her condition, but to share the respectful silence that had formed between them. "Your courage gave hope to all of us, Anya," he said one afternoon, his voice deep and sincere. "It reminded us of what we are capable of, even against the fury of Yakutia." Anya merely nodded, feeling an unexpected warmth in her chest. She did not seek glory, but the community's gratitude was a balm. One evening, when the full moon illuminated the snow outside with a silvery glow, the village gathered in the central yurt for a celebratory feast. It was not just for Anya and her grandson's recovery, but for life itself, for the victory over the relentless winter. Fires crackled, the scent of roasted meat and herbs danced in the air, and laughter, once rare, echoed with joy. Anya, seated in her place of honor, with her grandson nestled beside her, observed the scene. Her eyes scanned the familiar faces, each one a testament to her people's resilience. Boris stood up, his strong voice cutting through the murmur. "Friends, brothers and sisters, today we celebrate life, unity, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. We celebrate Anya, our guardian, our living legend." A chorus of applause and exclamations of approval filled the yurt. Anya felt her cheeks flush, but her eyes welled up. Senior approached her, holding her aged hands. "You have shown us, Anya, that a grandmother's love can be wilder and more resilient than any winter. You are the flame that guides us, the proof that hope never dies, even in the deepest darkness." In that moment, as the eyes of the entire village fixed on her with admiration and love, Anya understood. It wasn't just about saving her grandson, it was about rekindling the flame of hope in every heart, about reminding everyone that, together, they could face any adversity. The pain of her wounds and the trauma of her nights did not disappear, but they were enveloped by a new and powerful sense of purpose. She had defied death and nature, yes, but more importantly, she had reaffirmed the unbreakable strength of love and human connection. Winter still reigned outside, but inside the yurt, the warmth of that celebration and the light of hope burned stronger than ever, a beacon for the days to come. Anya, with her grandson safe in her arms, felt a deep peace and renewed strength. She was more than a grandmother. She was the pulsating heart of her village, an eternal symbol of overcoming. Anya, seated on her bed of furs, felt the warmth of her grandson nestled beside her, a warmth that radiated beyond her skin, heating every fiber of her being. The scars on her arms and legs, though still sensitive to the touch, no longer pulsed with the same searing pain. They were now a map of her journey, marks of a love that had defied death itself. She touched them occasionally, feeling the uneven texture beneath her aged fingers, and a soft, almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips. There was no more fear, only the certainty that she had done what was necessary. The nights, previously haunted by the roars and hungry eyes of the bears, were now more peaceful. Nightmares still came, like fleeting shadows, but the warmth of little Ivan nestled beside her was a talisman, an anchor that pulled her back to the safety of the present. She watched him sleep, his chest rising and falling in a calm rhythm, and felt a gratitude that filled every corner of her soul. He was there, alive, and that was all that mattered. Ivan, with the vitality and innocence of childhood, flourished. His eyes, previously full of apprehension, now shone with insatiable curiosity, exploring every detail of the world around him. He ran through the yurt, his small steps echoing joy, playing with the wooden doll that Ivan the hunter had carved with such care. His laughter, crystalline and pure, was the melody that warmed Anya's heart. Irrefutable proof that life always finds a way, even in the most brutal adversity. The scar on her soul, that of the fear of losing him, had finally closed, leaving behind only the unbreakable strength of a love that overcame everything. The village, in turn, had transformed in subtle yet profound ways. Anya's story, the elder who faced 7 giant bears, was not just a legend. It was a pillar of their existence, a catalyst. The fear of the relentless winter and the hunger that once haunted them was now tempered by a new resilience. The hunters, led by Boris, went out with renewed vigor, their traps and skills sharpened by the inspiration Anya had given them. The women, in their daily tasks, shared stories of her courage, and the children, instead of fearing winter, listened with reverence to the saga of the grandmother who had defied nature. Anya did not seek glory, but the community's gratitude was a balm for her soul. Boris, who visited her frequently, one afternoon sat beside her, his eyes fixed on the fire. "Anya," he said, his voice deep and full of respect, "your strength has shown us that there are no limits to what we can do when we fight for those we love. You gave us more than food, you gave us hope." Anya merely nodded, a soft smile on her aged lips. She had understood that her struggle had not been just to save her grandson, but to rekindle the flame of hope throughout the village, to remind them that even in the most adverse conditions, the human spirit, driven by love and solidarity, could flourish. She was not just a survivor, she was a beacon, a guardian of her people's faith and resilience. The marks on her body were the visible proof of her battle, but the peace in her soul was the true victory. Winter would continue to sink its claws, but the village, united and inspired, was ready to face it, knowing that love was the most powerful force against the cold, a promise that spring, one day, would arrive.